Think of beauty pageants and images of catwalks, makeup and women parading in elaborate dresses come to mind. The perception, perhaps not always fair, is that the contestants and the audience are focused only on what is skin deep. But this beauty queen defies the stereotypes. Bhasha Mukherjee is the reigning Miss England and will compete in Miss World this December.
So the winner of Miss England is Bhasha.
She's also a newly qualified doctor in the UK's National Health Service. She personifies the old adage about brains and beauty. She holds 2 different medical degrees, has an IQ of 146, making her officially a genius, and she's fluent in 5 languages. But controversy and drama still swirl around these pageants. A contest based on a woman's looks might seem out of touch in the age of the Metoo and Time's Up movements. But is the premise of pageants changing with the social and political changes of our times? I spoke to Miss England Bhasha Mukherjee one-on-one. Bhasha Mukherjee, Miss England, welcome to TRT World's One-on-One. There's a common perception that beauty queens are vacuous, airhead bimbos. So can you understand why someone might wonder why someone who's clearly intelligent, a doctor like yourself, might also want to be a beauty queen?
So for people that have that perception, I would encourage them to talk to the girls that go into pageantry. I think pageantry has changed a lot in the last decade. Miss World has always been about beauty with a purpose, and that's why someone like myself chose to go into something like Miss England that is directly tied with Miss World, because the emphasis nowadays is not just on external beauty, which is, I believe, very easily achieved in today's day and age with makeup, grooming, nice clothes. Everybody is so stunning these days, but beauty with a purpose is about using that beauty as a marketing tool to voice a message on social, environmental issues and standing for something that you believe in. And for me, that was a very important part of my journey into the pageantry industry.
I think the pageantry industry has been forced to change. Perhaps over time people have decided that some of the competitions themselves are outdated, but we still do see a swimsuit section. We still do see you being judged on how well you groom yourself, how well you can walk the catwalk. So there must be other ways you could make a difference. You don't have to be a beauty queen to make a difference.
Absolutely, that goes without saying. That's definitely true. And although different pageants do still have the superficial side to the beauty pageant, I'd like to just correct you on the fact that actually the swimwear round is no longer televised. It's not a compulsory round in Miss World anymore. I actually didn't even do the swimwear round in Miss England.
But some people do, don't they?
Yes,
they still
they
send
do.
in a photograph of themselves in a swimsuit or something they'd wear to the beach, don't they?
So I like to think that a pageant is just like going for a job interview. You're going to be judged on the way you look and groom and carry yourself, because that is a part of who you are. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, whereby we do have a whole resume that is checked, a background check that is done on us, and we have to do so many other charity work and all these other things that contribute to that final decision that's made. It's not made on just the beauty aspect, because I'm sure with 5 judges, they'd have 5 different opinions on who's the most beautiful. So on that basis, it is like a job interview. It is a job that you're applying for. In terms of why catwalk round and all these other rounds are important, it's because as Miss World or a Miss England, you're not just doing one role. You're actually doing 5 different jobs at once. You are expected to go to fashion shows and be showstoppers, and also go to charity events and launch products, launch an event, raise awareness, be a voice on social media. So actually it's a public figure overall. So the expectation's not just that of one role, and that's why we have so many different rounds to give us that wholesome, well-rounded appeal, so to speak.
If you're going to put your hand up to go in a beauty pageant, you must deep down somewhere think you're beautiful. When did you work out that you're pretty, you're beautiful?
I didn't. I realised that it was all in grooming, because when I was growing up, I got bullied and called Ugly Betty. and I got bullied for looking not your standard typical pretty girl. And that's why I made it a point that I wanted to prove people wrong and actually show that all it takes is good makeup skills, good grooming skills, and actually, you know, looking after your health overall. Then you can be the best version of yourself, and that's what it's about, being the best version of yourself and having that confidence. I do believe if you feel that you're beautiful, people perceive that as well. You know, it is about the confidence, I believe.
Confidence and perception really interesting in this era of social media. We have this perfect world on our Instagram accounts, Twitter, Facebook. You guys are very much encouraged to be very active on social media. Does it ever cross your mind that sometimes you're putting unattainable beauty elements onto social media, that young girls will be looking at that thinking, I'll never be that beautiful?
So this is why my social media, I've made it a point to always promote the reality that actually I have a transformation. You know, I have a before and I have an after. It was Breast Cancer Awareness Day a few weeks ago, and I posted a completely, utterly horrendous picture of myself in my pink bathrobe. And anybody would look at that and see, hold on a minute, that's literally me on a Sunday evening watching television or something like that. And I wanted to show them that. And actually, Miss England this year, we had the bare face round. And I was very excited for that, actually, to see that, you know, girls be more comfortable in their own skin and smile. And my picture, you know, went quite viral, actually, in all the news medias and internationally, because it is about telling young girls that actually you can transform with makeup. But what you are naturally, you're perfect just like that as well. And we should all just be very inclusive and accepting of who we are naturally.
Miss England's arguably given you a platform from which to do this work, which perhaps you wouldn't have had if you hadn't been in Miss England. Now, we could argue to wear black and blue, you could have found a different way to get a platform, but this is your platform. And what are you using it to do? Diabetes is the thing you feel strongly about at the moment?
Yes, so diabetes is a start, I believe, and I chose diabetes because it was very close to home. My father has got diabetes, he nearly lost his eyesight to this disease, and being South Asian myself, I have a four times higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes. In this country in itself, being the Western population, we have high risk of diabetes because of obesity. So in many ways, diabetes was very close to home, seeing it every day in the hospital and how debilitating this disease really is. It was something I wanted to focus on because it's a preventable disease. You know, my campaign's all about prevention. But to sort of transcend this and actually exceed this beyond this 1 year as Miss England, what I see 10 years from now, as you said, Miss England's given me this platform, this is a kickstart to what I really want to achieve out of my campaign, is health education being incorporated into the national curriculum. This is very relevant to today's society. We do learn about algebra and all these other subjects that actually a lot of people don't end up using in real life. We need to make education a little bit more tailored and at least add onto what national education is to be more practical. You know, a lot of people have family members who have illnesses. You know, this is where health education comes in. If we start teaching children at school about different health conditions, then I see a world when we all can be doctors to each other rather than running off to hospital. And that is where I believe the NHS can survive in the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years.
Do you think doctors have a responsibility to share with the public their knowledge? You've been at medical school for a long time, and I know doctors are busy people, but should there be more of an effort made by the medical community to do things like you're doing?
Absolutely. It's difficult because doctors are very overburdened, and this is where I think change needs to happen, that in terms of more people need to be joining the healthcare force. Ideally, obviously, we can't help the numbers that we have. But of course, if we did get some extra time in our careers to be able to go out to the community and educate them, that would be very, very handy. But even incorporation into the national curriculum in terms of nurses and other healthcare professionals, because you'd be surprised how much nurses and other healthcare professionals, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, how much they know. It's about knowledge sharing, and that can be absolutely transformational for the population.
What drove you to be a doctor?
So I was a very ambitious kid, very much into my books and everything, and every second day I wanted to be something different. You know, I wanted to be a footballer, an artist one day, a singer the next day, and the variety for me was key. I was into everything under the moon, you know, in terms of, arts, sciences, English, maths, everything. And actually, I realised that medicine was the best route forward in terms of being a science and an art, you know. We do have the science background and we do know the knowledge, but every patient is different. We have to be creative in talking to the patient, trying to convince them of taking a medication or doing a certain treatment. And that's where the art comes in, you see. That's where the humanities and all the communication skills comes in. And that was very exciting for me. I didn't know this at the time, how interesting this was, but I was very much a people's person, and medicine seemed like the right route for me.
You've worked really hard to get where you are, and you're at the start of what's clearly going to be a quite exciting career. But you were born in India. Mm-hmm. How much of your life before moving to the UK do you think's had an impact on your career decisions and perhaps even deciding to be a beauty queen?
Actually, very little on my the impact of what my time in India hasn't been so much on my idea of becoming a beauty queen or a doctor so much, but it's been so more about gratitude, I'd say, because I did see when I was a kid in India, I did see people who had not a lot of money, but they were still getting by, a lot of poverty. And actually the ethos of growing up in India really was about surviving in less. That's something I carried with me. And being an immigrant in this country, my family did have less in this country as compared to what we had in India. And financial struggles was a part of daily life. But it's about making do and making the best of that. So that's something I carried with me, and the gratitude of what I was able to have. And what I did have in this country was the fantastic education, the free healthcare, the free libraries, all these facilities that I'd never had access to before. That made me very, very grateful and made me work very hard. And of course, being from South Asian families, there is always that ambition of going into the field of medicine. All our parents and family members highly rate the field of medicine. And at the same time, we have had some very successful beauty queens from India. Miss Worlds, actually, some of the most successful Miss Worlds have been from India. India's been a very successful country. So in that way, we regard beauty pageants quite highly as well. That's why my mum actually signed me up for overseas Miss India. It was a category of Miss India that included girls of Indian origin who lived outside of India. All the way back in 2015, that was. But at that time, it was a choice between attending medical school, dropping out of medical school, going off to India and attending this pageant, or, staying and not doing the pageant. And I chose to stay with my education at the time. So, yes, in that way, I suppose my Indian heritage has had an impact in some ways on my career and my pageantry career as well.
Being a doctor is stressful, particularly a junior doctor. Mm-hmm. Is pageantry an escape for you?
I'd say they both are an escape from each other. It always has been. When I was a model, I still am in a way, when I was doing modelling through medical school, those few hours on set in front of the camera, I didn't think about anything to do with my exams or studying or anything like that. And it was a time to switch off. And actually, you'll find a lot of medics do something that's so starkly different from their medical career that allows them that escapism. It's very important to do that, I believe, to have that balance. And equally, actually, when I won Miss England, I enjoyed the time in my ward so much because I didn't have to be on my phone, didn't have to attend to social media. I didn't have that pressure to answer emails or phone calls or media questions and this and that. And I could just focus on a task and just do something mundane, but really quite structured. And, and I could just focus on that. Didn't have to be pretty, didn't have to dress up. Still felt like I was making a difference and still felt good about myself because of my job. So yes, they were both an escapism from each other, and it's very important to have that balance.
As you become more famous, and Miss World is just around the corner and we've all got our fingers crossed, there will be temptations for you. They could be in the form of reality television, they could be in the form of more lucrative modelling and TV opportunities. What's around the corner for you? Because you can't do that and be a doctor.
I've worked very hard to be a doctor and come this far. So I don't see myself, and again, I could be wrong, because times change and anything can change. I didn't expect to become Miss England myself. I do want to complete the training element of becoming a GP. Become a GP and take it from there. With being a GP, you do have opportunities to have a portfolio career, as we call it, where you can spend a segment of your time, obviously treating patients, and you actually can allocate a large part of your time to doing anything else you want. And I have seen lots of doctors in the media who are doing brand endorsements and all sorts of other things, and they still have time for their patients. It's about finding that balance and doing both of them. And if I do truly end up being successful in spreading my message of health education, then I would have to divide up my time. And I think that will be very important for me anyway, because I do want to have that 50-50 split of treatment and prevention. And of course, to be relevant, to be a voice that still is considered worthy of hearing, I still need to be seen in public places and on social media and still have that public image. That's the only way that I can push my campaign and have that maximum influence. So it needs to be a 50-50 split.
If we take our guidance from the movies, when you get to Miss World, you'll be asked something about what do you hope for the world? And of course, along the way, the joke's been that girls just say world peace and dolphin-safe tuna. So I thought I'd help you here, and I've been looking back at some of the previous questions, and I know there's one that asks, what would you say if you were able to sit down with a world leader? So what would you say if you were able to sit down with a world leader?
If I was to sit down with a world leader, I would talk to them about, environment's been very prevalent recently in the campaigns and all the protests. And I do believe that with world leaders, there needs to be a way where summits need to be done digitally. And that, I believe, can be a really good way to contribute on their behalf on cutting down on, the environmental output that we have, the carbon output. And if all world meetings can in some way in future be digitalized, so there isn't any travel involved and travel costs, travel fee, setting up a venue, all the plastic bottles and water bottles that are wasted at all these summits that are held, if we can arrange for something like that for all world issues, I think that would be a great step in, towards environmental, awareness.
By your own admission, you were a bookish child who studied and was the teacher's pet. So how on earth did you get involved in pageantry? Where did it all start?
I used to love the stage. The first thing I was ever good at was being on a stage and, in front of lights and an audience. I loved that. And I started doing that when I was about 5 or 6 years old, doing scripted plays and things like that. I was very much a dramatic child. And I carried that on. I carried on dancing, and that propelled me into modelling. So, in a way, I never really deviated too far from what is involved in pageantry. Pageantry was just another path, in a sense, of the same same roadworks. So it wasn't too different from anything that I had done before and was interested in.
And were you scouted, or did you put your hand up for Miss England?
Miss England, I was scouted on social media, and it was at a time that I was not prepared to go into pageants anymore. I'd done a few small local ones, and they were not the best experience for me, and I vowed never to do them. It actually took the Miss England team a year and a half to convince me, from the point of when they first approached me and until the point when I finally signed up for it.
What were they saying to you? It took them a year and a half. Why did they want you so badly?
So when I first had the meeting, I discussed my, my worries and how I had trust issues about pageants and,
About what sort of things?
Just about the format of them, whether they're corrupted, or whether there's decisions made on basis of being paid in or something like that. These negative experiences that I'd had before, I just didn't want to put myself through that again, because with any competition, you put so much of heart and soul and sweat and blood and everything into it. It's very disappointing at the end if the results are corrupt in any way, if you find out later that it was fixed or something like that. So I had trust issues with it. And
Are you saying that in some of the smaller pageants you'd been in, they were corrupt?
Absolutely, yeah. And unfortunately, there is that danger with anything that you take part in these days, that there is a chance for it to be not authentic. But I was very lucky that, despite all my doubts with Miss England, they are a very authentic pageant.
The corruption in the smaller ones, how were they corrupt? How were they fixed?
There's a lot of pageants out there now, and they are all selling dreams to girls. And the biggest of this is, if you're selling dreams, you should be able to deliver them, to the winner or to the girls that don't win, whatever it is, And the problem is in the deliverance that there's a lot of talk and very little delivery. And I'm only talking about the pageants that have kind of propped up here, then, and everywhere, the local pageants. And, we must always be careful. I would say to young girls out there that don't let people prey on you, and be very careful who you associate yourself with. Do your research, ask past candidates about, the validity of the pageant that you're going into. And also, don't fall for anything where they ask for a lot of money for entry fees and stuff. It really shouldn't be about that. And I have unfortunately been prey to things like that myself. So
you say preyed upon. In what way? What happens?
Oh, preyed upon in terms of money. The investment that they're in, that's involved in them. Some pageants will ask for extortionate prices to be entered into, and they'll ask for that to be sponsored from a company. And of course, then you're involving a company. You have to go through with it and keep you're involving a third party, and that can be quite messy sometimes.
So the pageant organisers require this huge entrance fee, and what were they promising in return that they then didn't give you?
Just the quality, or in terms of the exposure, the standard of the pageant overall. And of course, if you're having a sponsor come on board, they want something out of it in terms of promotion on social media, etc., or a platform. And sometimes there is no platform at the end of it. Sometimes you're just left with a sash, but nothing after you've won it or anything like that. So yeah.
What about the hashtag Metoo movement? Obviously, girls who are entering pageants are attractive, and in some cases there are men running these pageants. Do you feel preyed upon in that way ever?
I haven't, luckily, in my pageantry journey. Unfortunately, that is something that, again, is a part and parcel of the industry, that there are going to be such predators, sexual predators there. And in my early modelling career, there were a few. But, as you grow up, you learn to have boundaries and be able to stand up for yourself and say no and be taken seriously. There are some pageants I've heard that do have that problem as well. But don't let that deter you from the good pageants that are actually doing good. And that's where I think people should do their research.
Charity and service are a big part of Miss England and Miss World. You were well into charity and service before you got involved in these pageants. You started your own charity when you were just 17?
Yeah, I did. For me, it wasn't about doing charity. It's just something that I did with my community, and we did it every summer.
And what was it?
It's called the Generation Bridge Project. And what we do is we go into care homes and we do these fun day events. We always involve young people from the community. Each year we have a new set of volunteers who we essentially train to organise these events and run these events and actually communicate with the elderly. Overall, at the end of the journey, they come out so much more open and amicable and friendlier and just blossomed, actually. And those are skills that they can then take to universities and employment and show for it. And we've done so many certificates, awards, and even personal statements and job references from the Generation Bridge project.
Bhasha Mukherjee, good luck in Miss World, and thank you very much for joining us on TRT World.
Thank you.